So when it comes time to have a difficult conversation, the hard work for us has already been done. And it's already connected back into what people's expectations from us are. Now, we've done that as a part of the way that the business has been set up. If you have not done that, if you have been wishy-washy about the way that you communicate with people, if you don't have a very clear brand identity where your stakeholders, whether they're your customer, they're your staff, or they're your suppliers, if you don't have a clear identity with regards to the way that you communicate, this is the time to get that.
This episode is proudly brought to you by Mapper Forward's workshop, It's Time to Become a Coffee Consultant. Learn how to diversify your revenue streams and create freedom from your day job while saying goodbye to that alarm clock forever by becoming a consultant within the coffee industry or directly to consumers who have shifted towards home brewing and home roasting. Protect your income from challenging times in the coffee value chain by taking this course today. Go to mapperforward.coffee/workshops or click the link in the show notes for details.
Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 4 of a 5-part series with just me. We are talking in this series about how Mapper Forward is preparing our clients and our Mastermind Group participants for the volatility of 2025 and 2026 in the coffee industry. And in this episode, we are specifically going to focus on communication with your stakeholders. And we're going to start this by talking about who we mean by stakeholders. And your stakeholders will really depend on what part of the industry, your industry sector that you do business in. When you look at the blueprint that we talk about in our mastermind groups, that's the starting point. Your industry sector is which part of the industry you occupy. Are you a roaster? Are you a cafe owner? Are you a coffee producer? Are you an importer? Are you an exporter? Are you a podcaster? Are you a journalist? Are you any of those things and more, right? Where you occupy your little part of the coffee world, whether you're a business owner or you're an employee, this is really, really important for you to understand as your starting point. And the reason is because you need to then map out who the stakeholders are in your immediate ecosystem. And then you want to figure out who their stakeholders are, your secondary stakeholders. And so as you take a look at who your stakeholders are, then you need to figure out how does that connect back to the other things that I have defined about my business. So how does it connect back to my brand identity? How does that connect back to the problems that I'm looking to solve in my business? And then when we go back to what we talked about in the second episode, which is understanding my business, we need to figure out what are the things that I need to communicate to my stakeholders. So to some stakeholders, you may need to reassure them that everything is business as usual. But in this moment of volatility, when you've got all the kinds of medias, the social medias, traditional medias, all of it, are all talking about what's going on in coffee, you need to have a conversation even if nothing is changing for you. Now, I suspect that is the minority of people in coffee that are going to have a conversation that says, hey, it's business as usual. Because even people who came on this podcast and had said, nothing changes for us. We've been doing business like this, responsible business like this for many years, so nothing's going to change for us. Even those people are having to have difficult conversations because business has changed for them in less dramatic ways than for other people, but there still has been change that's happened. Other things that you may need to talk about is the fact that things are changing dramatically. Now, if you're talking to your suppliers, the way that you are having those conversations may be around capital. So it may be that, listen, guys, we have had to, after analysis that we've done in our business, we're going to have to look at either reducing the number of product lines that we've got, or we have to reduce the amount that the quality of the product that we have and pay for cheaper products, pay less money. We may need to reduce, we can't buy in bulk anymore because we don't have access to the amount of capital that we used to. The bank's not lending us. We don't have the line of credit that we had, or because of the cost of living crisis, we have seen that our customers have decided that they're going to be purchasing less things, and so we can't purchase as much as we typically have. We've seen a reduction in the quantity that product is moving. Whatever it is, go back. If this is the first episode of this series that you're watching, go back and look at the previous episodes, because that will inform how you get to the place where you need to start communicating to your stakeholders. You need to understand your business and your P&L and all the things about your business so that you know how to have these conversations. And when you know those things, figuring out the conversation that you need to have with your supplier versus the conversation that you need to have with your customer, who is another primary stakeholder in your business, is really, really important. And then what you need to figure out is, once you figure out who the stakeholders are and you figured out what you wanted to communicate to them, you've got to figure out how you're going to communicate it to them. Is it going to be through direct discussion? Is it going to be through social media? Is it going to be through your EDM or your electronic digital marketing platforms like your mailing list? Is it going to be on a podcast? We've had many people come on this podcast, have conversations with us, and then it's a signal to their usually secondary stakeholders, but it has been with their primary, oftentimes with their primary stakeholders, where they'll receive phone calls saying, listen, I heard you on the Map It Forward podcast and we heard you say this. Are we going to be in trouble? So the way that you communicate is really important. Then you've got to figure out, how direct am I going to be in the way that I'm going to communicate this? And that ties back directly to your brand book. It ties back directly to your brand story and your communication strategy and what you've decided is going to be your form of communication. In Map It Forward, our communication strategy has always been about keeping things simple. And it ties back to our brand values: integrity, openness, clarity, and authenticity. When those are your brand values, you're never gatekeeping information. You're always being straightforward. You don't pretend to be one thing in front of the camera and another thing behind closed doors. Your customers come to you. Our clients come to us because they want real talk. They do not want people who are going to pussyfoot around and tell them what they want to hear. They are coming to us because they want to solve problems in their business and they know we're the people to help them do that. They do not want people who are going to waste their time. They don't want people who are going to draw out these long consulting relationships where people are being paid by the hour and deliver no results. We have a 100% money back guarantee on what we're doing. So that, all of that is a part of the communication strategy that's embedded into the product. So when it comes time to have a difficult conversation, the hard work for us has already been done. And it's already connected back into what people's expectations from us are. Now, we've done that as a part of the way that the business has been set up. If you have not done that, if you have been wishy-washy about the way that you communicate with people, if you don't have a very clear brand identity where your stakeholders, whether they're your customer, they're your staff, or they're your suppliers, if you don't have a clear identity with regards to the way that you communicate, this is the time to get that. And the way that you start that is by saying to people, hey, listen, this is how we're going to be communicating moving forward. We want to have a really frank conversation with you about something, etc., etc., etc. You set the expectations. You set the expectations very clearly. And a really great way to do that is by sitting down with your stakeholders and being very clear with them about what success looks like to you at the end of this year or at the end of this working relationship. So that could be your staff, it could be your suppliers, it could be your customers. Having those conversations is really important so that you can bring people on board with your journey. And so a way that you might have that with a customer is, excuse me, hey guys, 2025 is proving to be a really challenging year in coffee. And our objective this year, in a year that is also a tough year for you during a cost of living crisis, is we are going to be increasing prices incrementally over the next 6 months. And we're going to have a 2% increase every month over that 6 months. And so we need to get to 12%. We don't want to hit you with that all at once, but we figured out that the fairest way that we can spread the risk, going back to our last episode, between what's happening with us and what's happening with you, so that we can be fair to our suppliers, so that we all remain in this supply chain, is that we'll be increasing our prices 2% per month for the next 6 months. That is a clear communication strategy that cultivates trust and helps your customer understand that you know what you're doing and you know why you're doing it. It also instills confidence in your other stakeholders, who are your suppliers, that you are seeing the risks that are coming and taking action to make sure that you stay in business and they stay in business. This is a really important step in managing the volatility of 2025 and 2026. If you're not having these conversations, what that means is that a number of things. It means that most likely people are going to pick up the signal that you are unaware of what's going on. You hear people say we had Carol Salom on the podcast earlier this year, where her customers had heard on the news and in other types of media that the price of coffee in Australia is going to $12 a cup. And Carol and her sister Sharon, the co-founders of Three Tomatoes, had not been increasing coffee as much as that. And so her customers were coming and saying, hey, listen, are you guys going to be okay? Because you haven't increased the price of coffee, the amount that you should be, like we're getting told it's going to be increased. Are you going to go out of business? And what Carol said is, we need to be improving our communication strategy with our clients, our customers more, because they started to get worried that we may end up going out of business. This is a very beloved cafe in their neighborhood. So them not communicating that was leading to people being uncertain of the longevity of this business. And so they were able to course correct that. And Carol was able to say, no. We are going to be increasing prices. We're just making sure that we're going to increase prices in a way that doesn't hurt you to a point where you'll no longer be able to afford coffee. But we're also looking at the overall health of the business so that we can find ways to make money and increase profit margins in other things that we're doing so that we don't have to increase coffee as much as we currently are. So these are all strategies that are helpful in your communication and things that I would encourage you to do so that you can leave your customers feeling, and all your stakeholders, your customers and your suppliers, feeling more confident about what you're doing. The final thing that I want to talk about, a stakeholder that we don't focus enough on at the moment, is our staff. If the staff are hearing on podcasts and in other places that there is a lot of volatility going on and you're not having conversations with them, they may look elsewhere. The last thing that we want to see is an industry where we have people pushing the business as far as it can possibly go without paying their bills. And then one day staff comes to work and there's a sign on the door that says, sorry guys, we've closed the business for good and you've done a runner. That's not helping anybody. And so this is where I want you to, if you haven't heard of this term before, I want you to get a very clear understanding of what your runway is. And your runway is, how long can I operate in business before I have nothing left? So how many weeks or how many months can I operate in business so that I can continue to activate and pay my bills responsibly? And what is that? Like, the reality of that for a lot of businesses right now is probably days or a week. We have very many people that are telling us, look, I've got a week. I want to challenge you to ask you an even better question. When you say a week, does that week include being able to pay out your staff for the time that they've worked during this week? So do you have money in the bank to pay out your staff's notice period? Do you have money in the bank to pay all the commitments that you have to pay? So we talked about cash flow statements before. All of the bills that you have owing, do you have the money to cover them? That's what your actual runway is. I want you to think about that, and then I want you to think about all the scenarios ahead of you and how you're going to navigate those if your runway gets shorter. But what I'd prefer you focus on as well is, how do I increase my runway? And we've got some videos on our social media that are on Instagram at mapperforward.coffee that could be helpful for you to do that. That's what we talk about a lot in the Mastermind Groups. So in the final episode of this series, we're going to talk about different strategies for different scenarios in this volatility in this market. I really hope you're finding this series helpful. If you are, please share it with someone, and make sure that you subscribe or follow wherever you're listening to this or watching it. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day.
I really hope you enjoyed this episode, friends. Please don't forget to show us some love by subscribing, liking, commenting, and most of all, sharing this podcast with your friends. Check the show notes for links, including our sponsors and our Patreon. And stay tuned for more great conversations on the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward.